The philosopher Nietzsche called hope the worst of all evils because it prolongs the torments of man. Well, we're going to turn that thinking on its head today, showing why hope will play a vital role during the Great Tribulation. Stay with us for today's Grace to You. Thanks for being with us on this Tuesday edition of the Grace to You broadcast. Today, John MacArthur returns to his look at the prophecies of Daniel, focusing on the Great Tribulation that will be part of the future of Israel. And that's the title of John's current study, The Future of Israel. To imagine what the Great Tribulation will be like is enough to send shudders down your spine. So how should you as a Christian prepare for the events foretold in Scripture? How can you be characterized with hope and joy when the prophecies in Revelation and Daniel are so horrific? Well, here's John MacArthur to answer the important questions about the Great Tribulation.
Next to faith and love, the Apostle Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the greatest reality in the world is hope. Faith, hope, and love, the three most critical elements in all of human thinking. Man cannot exist without faith or love or hope. As we focus on our passage, the theme is hope, one of that triad of great realities. Hope is essential to all meaningful life. Unless there is some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, man ends in despair. Unless there is some kind of anticipation for a wonderful reality in the future, man finds himself unable to enjoy the moment in which he lives. Hope especially is important to those who suffer. God knows well that in order for man to endure the present stress, he has to have a future hope. And so all throughout the Bible, God presents to man a great hope, an eternal hope, a hope in the future, a hope beyond all other hopes that gives to man a full, rich meaning to life. Now, as you come to the close of the book of Daniel, this is precisely what Daniel does. The whole purpose of this chastening period for Israel is to test them and to purge and to make them white. In other words, God never gives up on His people until finally they are purified. Finally they are purged. They will be subjected, says the angel to Daniel, to a series of Gentile pagan oppressors who will bring them grave suffering. But it is all designed by God to purge them, to test them, and to make them white. In other words, God keeps it going until they finally respond properly. Well, that's a pretty bleak message, isn't it? For God to say as His final word to Daniel, Daniel, it's just going to be like this for thousands of years, and then leave it at that, would leave no light at the end of the tunnel. It would be so bleak. And so in the first 3 verses of chapter 12 comes the light. This is hope. This is hope. That even though it's going to be dark for thousands of years, and even though the people of Israel will not respond to God, and even though the time is going to come when they will actually reject their own Messiah and in His place accept Satan's counterfeit, the Antichrist, even so, in the end, there's hope. There's hope. Look at the beginning of chapter 12, verse 1. First few words. And at that time. Just that for now. Just that phrase. What time? The time He's been discussing. What time has He been discussing? Oh, in verses 36 to 45 of chapter 11, He was discussing the time of the Antichrist, the consummate oppressor of Israel, the one who would bring the greatest amount of pain, the one who would slaughter the most Jews. He'll slaughter more than Hitler ever did. The one who is the worst oppressor. But even at that time, at that very time, in fact, it could be translated during that time. At the very time when everything is the worst, in the middle of the great tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, when there is this great world ruler, when there is this massive warfare that ends in the bloodbath of Armageddon, at that very time, when the Antichrist attempts to slaughter all of Israel, when he desecrates the temple, at that very time, hope will dawn. That's the message as chapter 12 opens. In other words, when it gets to the worst, it's nearly time for the best. The darkest comes just before the dawn. Well, how and why? How and why at that time can men have hope? Several reasons. I want to share them with you. First of all, there will be a special distress. There will be a special defender. There will be a special deliverance, a special destiny, and a special dividend. Those are the reasons for hope. First of all, there is coming a special distress. Back at verse 1 again. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince who standeth for the children of thy people. Now listen to this. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. In other words, Daniel says there is coming a time like no other time. A special distress. Israel has suffered much. Israel suffered much from the Babylonians. Incredible slaughter. Suffered much from the Medo-Persians. They suffered much from the Greeks. They suffered much from the Romans. They have suffered much in the history even since the Roman time. They have suffered much from the Crusaders. They suffered much even in a more modern Europe. They suffered from the Hitlers. They've suffered and suffered and suffered. And all of it has been the rod of God. All of it has been the refining process of God for their rebellion and rejection, and all of it has been meant to draw them to Him. But the worst suffering is yet to come. There will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation even to that time. Now that is a Hebraism. That is a Hebrew idiom. It is also used several times in the 9th chapter of Exodus. It means this is the worst ever. This is the worst ever. Exodus 9, 18, and 24, for those of you who want the scriptures specifically. But it is a Hebrew idiom that means this is the worst. Frankly, people, we have to make that announcement to Israel. The worst is yet to come for them. It isn't going to get better. It's going to get worse. Jesus said the same thing. Look at Matthew 24. Jesus said exactly this. Matthew 24, verse 15. Actually, he talks about in verse 7, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and all of this is just the birth pangs, just the beginning of pain. Verse 15, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand. Then let them who are in Judea flee into the mountains. When you see the Antichrist desecrate the temple, when you see him establish himself as the God of the universe, when you see him call all men to worship him, when the abomination takes place, you better run. And him who is on the housetop, let him not come down to take anything out of his house. Don't even go inside to get anything, just run. If you're out in the field, don't go back to take your clothes. And woe unto those who are with child and those who nurse children in those days, because it's going to be hard to run when you have little children and nursing infants. Pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath. In other words, they're going to scatter so fast. For there shall then be great tribulation, here it comes, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor shall ever be. And except the days were shortened, There would be no flesh saved. And you get the picture, don't you? Jesus said the same thing that Daniel said. An unprecedented time of trouble for the people of God, Israel. The book of Revelation describes that final time of human history with terms that are beyond our imagination to even grasp. But let me run it by you very fast. From Revelation chapter 6 through Revelation chapter 19, you have the details of that period of time, the last 3.5 years of Daniel's 70th week, the great time of tribulation. And the writer John sees in the vision there the following elements to that time. War, famine, 25% of the world killed, the collapse of the heavenly bodies, 1/3 of the earth destroyed, 1/3 of the sea destroyed, the creatures in it and the ships on it, 1/3 of the fresh water, and many multitudes of people who drink it, 1/3 of the sky lights, the stars, the release of hell's demons to overrun the earth, the slaughtering of the beast, and the false prophet consummates their evil, vile ministry that goes on during that time. Body sores all over men. Everyone in the sea and all living creatures in the sea are killed. All fresh water will be polluted. Scorching sunlight will burn people to death. Darkness will cover the earth. Pain, sores, more demons, and it just goes like that from Revelation 6 to 19. And in addition to that, that's what comes upon the earth in general. But in addition to that, you have God allowing the Antichrist to oppress Israel in a final act of purging. An incredible time of suffering. In addition to all the activity that God is directly involved in this incredible time of tribulation, there is all the activity that Satan is involved in, which God allows, as evil finally reaches its apex. Now mark it. The whole course of the world and all of its history is outlined in Scripture to move toward a Holocaust.